At 2:20 in the morning, the doorbell rang, and a man's voice drifted through the quiet house, calling her babe like he belonged there. I froze before I even moved because something in his tone sounded practiced, not confused. And in that single moment, I realized there are betrayals that don't arrive with evidence, but with certainty. My name is Carter Whitfield, and I had spent 3 years building a life with someone I thought I understood completely. We lived in a quiet stretch of Greenwich, Connecticut, the kind of neighborhood where every driveway held a polished car and every conversation carried a polite distance. My fiancée, Sloane Harrington, fit perfectly into that world. She was composed, deliberate, and always just a little out of reach emotionally, which I once mistook for elegance. That night, I had fallen asleep early after reviewing contracts for a client, exhausted but content with the rhythm of our routine. The ring on her finger had felt like a promise I could trust, until that doorbell rang. I checked the time again, as if I had misread it. 2:20 a.m. No one respectable shows up unannounced at that hour in a place like ours. I stepped toward the hallway slowly, hearing the voice again. "Babe, you left your purse in my car." It wasn't loud. It wasn't aggressive. It was casual, familiar, like this was normal. Behind me, I could hear Sloane shifting in bed, her breathing changing in a way that didn't sound like confusion. It sounded like recognition. And that was when something inside me quietly broke. I didn't turn back to look at her. I didn't ask her who it was. I walked to the door. Each step felt deliberate, like I was already preparing for something irreversible. When I opened it, a man stood there in a tailored coat, holding a small designer purse in one hand. He looked like he belonged in our world. Mid-30s, confident posture, expensive watch, the kind of man who doesn't hesitate when he speaks. He smiled slightly when he saw me. Not surprised, not embarrassed, just mildly inconvenienced. "You're not Sloane," he said. I didn't answer immediately, because in that moment, I wasn't deciding what to say. I was deciding what this meant. Before we go any further, think about this for a second. If you were standing where I was, would you ask questions first, or would you already know the answer? I stepped aside slightly, but didn't invite him in. "She's inside," I said. My voice sounded calmer than I felt. He nodded, as if this was a minor logistical issue. "No problem," he said. "I'll just hand this off." Behind me, I heard Sloane's footsteps approaching. Not hurried, not panicked, measured. When she appeared in the hallway, her expression was already composed. She looked at him, then at me, and in that glance, I understood something that words wouldn't have clarified anyway. There was no shock, no attempt to deny, just calculation. "Thanks, Reed," she said quietly, stepping forward to take the purse from his hand. Reed, a name she had never mentioned. Not once in 3 years. He gave her a brief smile. "Text me when you're free tomorrow," he said. Then he glanced at me again, still calm, still not apologetic. And then he walked away. No confrontation, no explanation, just exit. The door closed softly behind him. The house felt different immediately, like something invisible had shifted permanently. I turned to Sloane slowly. She was holding the purse tightly now, her knuckles slightly pale, but her face remained steady, controlled. "Do you want to explain?" I asked. "Or should I just assume?" She exhaled, not dramatically, just enough to signal that this was inconvenient. "It's not what you think," she said. And for the first time that night, I almost laughed, because there are phrases people use when the truth is already obvious. And that was one of them. "I didn't say what I think," I replied. She paused, and that pause told me everything she wasn't saying. "It's complicated," she added. Of course it was. It's always complicated when someone gets caught. I leaned against the wall slightly, not because I was tired, but because I needed something solid to hold on to. "How long?" I asked. She hesitated again, not because she didn't know, but because she was calculating the version of the truth she could live with. "A few months," she said finally. "A few months." The words echoed strangely, because in those same months, we had booked our wedding venue. We had discussed guest lists. We had talked about future investments. Everything had seemed aligned, except it wasn't. "Why?" I asked. Not angrily, not loudly, just directly. And this time, she didn't hesitate as long. "Because I didn't feel certain anymore," she said. That answer landed harder than anything else. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was honest in a way that didn't excuse anything. And instead of telling me, I said, "You found certainty somewhere else?" She didn't respond, because there was nothing to respond with. Silence filled the space between us. And it wasn't the kind of silence you fix. It was the kind you accept. Before we continue, ask yourself something honestly. If someone tells you they weren't sure about you, do you fight to prove your worth, or do you walk away before they decide again? I stood there for a long moment, looking at the person I had planned to marry, and realizing I didn't actually know her. Not in the way I thought I did. "I think you should leave," I said finally. Her eyes flickered slightly, not with sadness, with surprise. "You're not even going to talk about this?" she asked. I shook my head slowly. "We just did," I replied. She opened her mouth like she wanted to say something more. Maybe an explanation, maybe an apology, maybe something to regain control of the situation. But then she stopped, because she understood something at the same time I did. This wasn't a negotiation. This was an ending. She nodded once, quietly. Then she turned and walked back toward the bedroom. I heard drawers opening, closet doors sliding, the quiet sounds of someone removing themselves from a life they had already left emotionally months ago. I didn't follow her. I didn't supervise. I didn't need to, because trust wasn't the issue anymore. Time passed strangely after that. At some point, she came back into the hallway with a small suitcase. "Not everything, just enough. I'll come back for the rest later," she said. I nodded. There was nothing else to say. She paused at the door for a second, as if waiting for something. A reaction, a question, a plea. But I gave her nothing, because some moments don't require expression. They require acceptance. She left, and the door closed again. This time, permanently. The house was silent, but not empty. It still held everything we had built. It just no longer held what it meant. I walked back to the bedroom slowly and sat on the edge of the bed. Her side was already different, not physically, but psychologically, like it belonged to a version of reality that no longer existed. I didn't cry. I didn't break anything. I didn't call anyone. Because the truth is, when something like that happens, your mind doesn't explode. It recalibrates. In the days that followed, everything moved in a practical direction. The engagement was quietly dissolved. The venue deposit was partially refunded. Friends were informed with careful, neutral language. No scandal, no drama, just facts. Sloane returned once, a week later, to collect the rest of her belongings. We spoke briefly, polite, measured, like two people who had never planned a future together. Reed never appeared again, not at the house, not in any visible way. And strangely, that didn't matter, because he wasn't the reason anything ended. He was just the evidence that it already had. Months later, I found myself thinking less about what she did and more about what she didn't say earlier. Because betrayal rarely starts with action. It starts with silence, with hesitation, with the slow erosion of honesty. And by the time it becomes visible, it's already complete. I didn't hate her. I didn't forgive her either. I simply understood her. And then I let her go. Personal reflection. What makes this situation compelling is not the act of betrayal itself, but the quiet progression that led to it. Sloane's decision was not impulsive, and that is what makes it psychologically significant. She did not act out of chaos, but out of unresolved uncertainty that she chose not to communicate. From her perspective, the relationship had already shifted internally before any external action occurred. Her failure was not simply in seeing someone else, but in avoiding the discomfort of honesty. Carter's response, on the other hand, reflects a controlled psychological boundary. He does not escalate, argue, or seek validation. Instead, he processes the situation in real time and makes a decision based on what is observable rather than what could be debated. This is a form of emotional clarity that many people struggle to reach under pressure. Reed's presence is also important, not as a villain, but as a neutral participant who operates within his own understanding of the situation. He does not hide or apologize because, from his perspective, there is nothing to conceal. This highlights how different individuals can operate within entirely separate versions of the same reality. Ultimately, the situation demonstrates how relationships often end long before they formally collapse. The visible moment is rarely the beginning. It is simply the point where the invisible becomes undeniable.